Hello, friends of the paranormal. This is your co-host, Stu, and I'm here with the paranormalist and ghost lady of Pennsylvania, Patty Wilson. Patty, how is this first Sunday in April treating you?
Okay, it's been quiet.
Knowing your household, that's probably a very, very good thing.
It is. So if I look rested, it's because I spent half the day sleeping. There was nobody here. And I don't
Well,
say that like I want it to be that way all the time, but it was nice to have a day off.
no, normally you have, well, I know Saturday's your day to have a lot of little people around, but, and
Yeah.
when I say little people, I mean younglings, grandchildren.
Yes. There's 8 of them, so it
Mhm.
doesn't take long for the little people to pile up.
Right. So, if you are just finding out about us, we really appreciate you tuning in, and we hope you'll subscribe and stick around. I mean, we do have quite the catalog of episodes now. This one is episode 130. We have everything about our podcast in the description. We have a couple of Facebook groups, which I'd really like to kind of merge them down into one, but that because we have the one started by the previous administration and then the one we have now. So we'll see about that. And we have various links, including Buy Me a Coffee. And I would like to send a very heartfelt thank to Lisa, who bought us some coffee.
Right?
And I just so happened that I drank so much coffee today that I switched to a non-caffeinated beverage for a while. But we really appreciate listeners like Lisa. And again, please, there's no obligation to do that, but we really do appreciate it from the bottoms of our heart.
Yes.
Here's where I would normally ask you what's the topic, but since this is part 2 of last week's episode, I will let you proceed.
So last week we visited historic mermaids. And this week I'm going to go into modern mermaids. I ended the episode with the story in 1940s of the Japanese military on an island and having events happen. And really what started this whole thing is a story that will come towards the end. I began to do a little reading and I came up with some really interesting stories that I just had to share. And these are the stories that I really wanted to share. So I wanted to go to a story that took place in Zimbabwe.
Oh,
And there is a story there that made it into the paper in the early 2000s of a woman who claimed she was kidnapped by 3 mermaids while bathing in a river there. So let's start with this. This is a fascinating story. So basically, this is all coming from the Zimbabwe News Network, where they interviewed the woman. Obviously, that tells us she survived her encounter, but it's
okay. Yeah.
very odd. So they were her and her sister. They're adult women in their 30s. They were visiting a family member, an uncle, who lived not too far from a river in that area. And they went to bathe in the river, which is a normal thing for them to do as a way of, getting cleaned up and stuff. And the lady's name is Clarice Chama. And she said that she was 34 years old when this happened. She was in the Zenda village in the Buhera district at the Sabakwi River. And she and her sister were bathing. And all of a sudden, the water began to churn. And she felt herself kind of pulled into this whirlpool, if you will. And the next thing she remembers, she was in a cave under the water. She was told by these 3 mer creatures, these beings, these women, that she was being kidnapped by them. Basically, they were taking control of her. And she was given some food to eat, which was 2 little silver fish that she was told she had to eat raw. She didn't really feel like she had any options, so she eventually did eat them. And what she said is that these fish, they kept bringing her fish for the whole 2 weeks she's down there. She talks about being in an underwater cave where she could breathe above the water. And that they told the women, the mermaids told her that if she did not eat, they would kill her. So she listened, and she said that she didn't really have any sense of time of how long this was, because there's no day or night in this cave. So she really kind of loses that. However, her sister, who was with her, immediately gets out of the water and she runs for help. And, people come to try to help. They think she's probably caught in a snag under the water or something. They all look for her, and this goes on for quite a while. It becomes a big story in the region at the time. So different people from different churches in the region come and offer their services. Maybe we can help. Somebody said maybe she was killed by one of the mermaids. This river is known for these stories. So they eventually come across this particular prophet, and the translation of his name is that he is John the Baptist. He named himself for John the Baptist, but in the Zimbabwe language. And his real name is Edborn. So this prophet and his church goers come to the water's edge, and along with the family, they begin these prayers. And this goes on for some time. And eventually the water becomes murky and it begins to swirl, according to the reports of those people present. And I am sure that they were not the only ones present. I am sure there was a lot of gawkers, because this was a big story at the time. And eventually the family saw what looked like her face coming up out of the water, her body, and she's unconscious. They think she's dead. They drag her to the surface, off onto the land, and this Mr. Edborn starts yelling at them to spit on her. I know that sounds insane, but this is what he said: spit on her.
Okay.
Just keep spitting on her. And there was her family
Mhm.
members who had to do it. And so they begin to do it, and she's clasping in her hand a basket and a little spear. They spit on her for some time, and eventually she begins to cough and she comes around. And I don't know what the significance of the spitting was, something to do with her faith or whatever,
Mm.
but she comes around, she sits up, she's confused, dazed, she's sort of surprised. And when he asks her, what had happened, she explains what she remembers, and that these mermaids had come to her earlier that day and had told her that she had to go back, that there were people looking for her, and it wasn't safe for them to hold on to her any longer. So they gave her this basket, which had a little lid and latch to it, and this spear. And they said that they were going to give her these gifts for the inconvenience, basically, of them disrupting her life. And that when she went back to the land, these gifts were medicine that could heal people. And so she had hung on to them as she was coming up out, and that was the last thing she remembered until she came to the land. The interesting thing is that then this prophet gathers them up, and he insists that they have to be burned because they are a form of witchcraft, this medicine that is according to him. So he destroys all of this stuff, and he does prayers over her, and she goes home. But this whole thing was followed by like their national news network. They had reporters there. It went on for like around 2 weeks. And now, if that sounds like it's insane, and
It does.
it does, I know. But here's the thing, it's not the only story like that. Around that area, there are a ton of these stories of mer people stealing other people and human beings and taking them down. In 2017, there were 2 deaths in that river that were attributed to mer people, drowning people, holding them under the water and drowning them. In 2016, there was a woman who fell asleep along the edge of the water there. And when she woke up, 2 days had gone by and all her teeth had been pulled. And she said that the mer people stole them. It sounds insane. However, again, not the only person. There is a gentleman by the name of Justice Mangyongan who was kidnapped by mermaids for 2 years. He's actually a local authority, and he said when he heard this story that he recognized a lot of what Clarice was saying. He said what happened to him was that he was kidnapped through a whirlpool that suddenly came up, and he was pulled down in and was taken by the mer people who made him live with them for almost 2 years. He said, but I wasn't tortured. I was given knowledge. They taught me to heal other people. And he said that Carice had described being given the silver fish and being told if she didn't eat, she would die and all of this. And he said, it's very much the same for me. I was given these fish, but they appeared rotted. And he said, but they told me if I didn't eat, I would die. So I ate them. And they gave me millet or sorghum. He wasn't sure which. It was a meal, a ground meal with water in it to make a paste. And he said, if you show any sign of disgust at their food, they are not happy and they will kill you. They told me up front what the rules were, and it took me 2 years before they were willing to let me leave. So to give you some reference, we're talking like 2012 all the way to 2019, these stories were emerging. ABC News in Australia covered the stories, not just the Zimbabwean newspapers and stuff, but I mean, like this was a big story at a time. And I found it fascinating because even though it sounds absolutely insane, a lot of people were taking this as a serious story. The girl was gone. Her family knew she was gone. They literally dragged the river for her. The police were called. All kinds of people came up and hunted for her, and she literally came back up out of the water after 2 weeks in the water.
Yeah, that's usually past the time that you would expect survivability.
Yeah. And I mean, and honestly, anybody with in your right mind, you wouldn't necessarily want to be telling that story, but the story basically unfolded the way it was reported because they had reporters out there, or at least it superficially looked that way. So we're going to go to 1967 on the main islands of British Columbia and Canada. There was a ferry filled with tourists who were going along the coast there, and they reported that the entire ferry boat reported that they had seen a blonde-haired mermaid sitting topless on the beach with flowing hair and the lower half of her body looking like a porpoise. She was eating salmon, fish, and it said, this actually appeared in the Times Colonist, which was a newspaper in the area, and this is how they reported it. They said the creature was seen in the early evening by passengers on ferries, meaning multiple ferries, close to the west entrance of Active Pass. The Daily Colonist reported on the sighting the next day, including a photograph that was said to have been taken by George Harrison of Sioux City, Iowa. Other witnesses said that the mermaid had a large fish, a coho salmon, and one swore she was taking bites out of it. This was reported on June the 13th of 1967. Long, silver blonde hair and topless were generally agreed upon. The next day, she was referred to as the dimpled mermaid, as one passenger described her that way, and that she had the lower body of a fish. The newspaper said she had been at Helen Point at the northwest corner of Main Island. A Kobe Hill man flew over the area shortly after 7 p.m. and managed to get an aerial photograph which corresponds closely to the picture taken from the Queen of Sancha, which was the name of the ferry ship, by the Iowan visitor. The aerial photograph, which was not published in the paper, apparently showed a silvery object on a rock beside the mermaid. One male witness said that the mermaid was a cute blonde with dimples, and this added to the definition. He said she seemed to be enjoying the wake of the ferry washing over her. They did not give all of the witnesses names, but there were several who were listed. That's a lot of people. I mean, if you're talking several ferry boats. So the Times colonists then would go on to offer a reward of $25,000 for anybody who could come up with a solution to this mystery. The offer was made by Charles White, excuse me, who made the condition that the panel of competent marine biologists had to judge whether or not whatever the story was legitimate, and confirmed that the mermaid was a real thing. No one ever attempted to claim the reward.
Yeah, would that amount of money be worth the ridicule that you'd expend for the rest of your life, probably? So,
Yeah, no, I get it. But I have to tell you, I've
mhm.
had some weird stuff. Like there's a story I tell about a giant snake in the area I live in. At one point in the late 90s, 1990s, around 2000, there was three people who saw the snake. Um, Two young men in their 20s and the father of one of the young men. And they saw it at dawn. And they called the police. They were so rattled by what they saw. And I remember talking to the one young man because I knew him personally, and I asked him about it. And he said to me, with all the ridicule I'm getting for what I did, do you honestly think I would have called them if they, and not just said, I admitted by now that it was just a fake so that it would all go away. So, sometimes we don't think about all that stuff, but I just thought it was a really interesting story that so many people claimed in that one night to have seen her. There's another story about a photographer who did underwater photography, and he had seen he claimed a mermaid. And so it said to him, he's actually that's what he does for a living, and he was really well known in Australia for his photography. He was like at the apex of his trade. And he goes out and spends like a couple weeks going into the water every day looking for what he thought he saw. And he gets two really interesting photographs out of it of what looks like a mermaid. I mean, it's a silhouette, not a, because it's there, like the water, the light is coming through the water, creating the silhouette. But he got two really good shots of that he then published. And they made it all around the world in newspapers at the time. And this would have been in the 2000s. And he was just completely convinced by what he saw. So we're going to go on to another story. So this is from paranormal researcher Albert Rosales, who had a very interesting case in 1986. So a witness from a vessel called the Yulin contacted this researcher and said that he had seen a mermaid that had confronted him on board the ship, like it was in the water right off the edge of the ship, and then dove into the ocean. So he said they were on board a ship based in the Black Sea called the Yulin, and on its way to Singapore when a sailor named Victor Tigan had just returned from watch and was laying very tired on his cot in his area. He was reading a book. Suddenly he felt someone staring at him, and he looked up and saw one of the round portholes, and in that porthole was the face of a strange-looking female staring at him attentively. Her hair was dark, her skin tanned, and her eyes were blue and much larger than human eyes. For several seconds they stared at each other, and then Victor jumped off his cot, kind of caught his breath, and ran out of the room screaming, running to one of the other rooms where there was a friend, and he grabbed his friend and tried to bring him back to show him. He gathered up his friend and a couple other men tagged along, but they could not find anything, and no one else had seen it. He refused to sleep in that cabin alone after that and ended up sleeping on the floor in somebody else's room because he wanted to know why that thing was watching him. And whatever it was, it must have disturbed him enough that he actually wrote to a paranormal researcher that he had heard of and asked if anybody else had ever had such experiences. So I thought that was interesting. In 1988, a scuba diver by the name of Robert Foster was off the coast of Florida. He saw a disturbance in the water he described it as though something was kicking silt up around him, like something stirring up the bottom. And it was kind of a murky of water. And he said, out of it emerged a strange creature. He reports it as like this. He says that it was a vague shadow splashing towards him, and the water began to churn wildly, and clouds of sediment began to swirl upward as the creature rushed at him. It appeared to undulate rather than glide, so that motion of undulating. When the fast-moving form got within 20 yards of him, he noticed something odd about it, appendages like arms that seemed to reach out toward him, and each arm appeared to have sharply taloned fingers. He then saw the creature in full view. He saw an unmistakable pair of breasts, long flowing hair, smooth skin, scaly tail from the waist down, and it appeared to be half woman and half fish. He said, I've never seen such evil hate in the eyes of any human being or animal before. That's an exact quote. The creature reached out for him, and Foster shot up towards the surface and was able to scamper over the side of his craft, and he never saw the creature again. So he was in the water. As I said, this is another photographer who was like out early in the morning when he encountered this. And these are people that, these are legitimate people. They have jobs and careers, and they don't want to be known as crazy, but whatever it is, it's rattling them. So in August of 1991, a witness was swimming alone at night in an area of Cape Aya in the Black Sea when he said at the time the conditions were very calm and serene. He felt quite relaxed in the water until his thoughts were intruded upon by what felt like somebody jabbing at his shoulder. He thought he was alone. When he looked to see what was there, because he thought maybe one of his friends who was supposed to be on the boat had slipped into the water to kind of spook him.
Yep.
And I could see that would be a prank that you might expect. He said, whatever it was began swimming towards him, and he started to swim towards the shore. And this is what he said next. So suddenly he felt this jab on his shoulder. He turned in time to see the face of a young woman with long, light-colored hair, clearly visible in the moon. Her eyes were much bigger than normal human eyes, and she seemed to emit a phosphorescent light. Scared, the witness pushed the woman's hand as she reached out for him, and he began swimming toward the shore as fast as he could. He could hear water splashing. He was afraid to turn around. He thought it was following him. Near the shore, he felt another strong jab on his back, and when he turned around, he saw the face of the woman again, which appeared to be disappointed, but he kept going. He wanted to get onto the shore as fast as he could. His friends were coming in on the boat, and they were yelling at him, "Did you see it? Did you see it? Did you see it?" They ground the boat onto the beach, and they claimed that they saw the shiny silvery body of a woman, half fish, in the water following him. It took hours for him to calm down, and a hefty dose of vodka, he adds. He said, but somehow I had this feeling like I needed to see this mermaid again. And on several occasions, I went to the same location to swim, but I never saw her. He said, I have dreams to this day of this mermaid beckoning me to come back into the water. So in 1992, there was a incident that took place in Playa Media Luna in Puerto Rico. A gentleman by the name of Mr. Perez and his young nephew were out swimming on the beach. It was a family event, grandparents and everybody just kind of went out for the day on the beach when they met a young man about 12 years of age emerging from the water beneath them. When they asked who he was, because he came up to the surface and began to swim around them, and they was like, oh, who are you? Where'd you come from? Small community, you pretty much know everybody kind of a deal. The boy let out a sound like a dolphin before diving beneath the waves. A short time later, the boy reappears, and Mr. Rosales said, this is what happens next. He said, moments later, the boy reappeared and was bringing some sand in his hand, which he offered to the two people, Mr. Morales and his nephew. He said, He wanted us to eat the sand. He made the motion of eating, but they were like, no, no.
Mm.
Then they were surprised to see the boy eat the sand like material. And I'm wondering if it was what that woman described as the sorghum or the maize that was ground. Maybe that was what it was. They described that he was completely human-like with long black hair, wearing a light-colored shorts, which I thought was interesting, but that he dived deep into the water again and then returned with algae in his hands, which he again offered to the witnesses, then emitted a strange whistling sound as if he was trying to communicate through whistles and these cries with the two people. After a few moments, the stranger began to imitate their speech, repeating the words they said to him. And eventually, he said a couple words on his own, which were the bottom of the sea. And a few minutes later, he stood up and said, "Goodbye, humans," and dove back into the deep water. The man and the nephew began watching to make sure the boy came out of the water, thinking there must be something wrong with him. They waited till dusk and no one came. They notified the police and there were no bodies ever found. 1998, April. This is the one I was telling you about. Master diver Jeff Lechner and 6 other divers were exploring the ocean right off of Kona Coast in Hawaii. And the island has a long legend of mermaids lurking in the waters. Leacher later claimed that they had encountered a mermaid and he had gotten photographs of her. He said that he was under the water and he noticed this thing coming at him, and one of the men began to yell like and point at this thing coming, and he said it was about 10 feet from the bow of the boat, and it was a nude woman from the waist up. He couldn't see the bottom at first. He said she was playing in our wake. Suddenly one of the men on the port side started yelling and saying, "I can't believe what I'm seeing." And she had a beautiful face. There was no way this was a human being swimming. She moved so fast that no human could swim like that. And she didn't swim hand over hand or anything like that. It was just undulating.
Mhm.
And she was keeping up with the dolphins that were also moving in the wake of the boat. He said, she leapt into the air and my heart almost gave out on me. The lower half of her was scales, tapering back to a huge fishtail. She leapt among the dolphins as though playing with them. I photographed some colorful fish with my underwater cameras, and suddenly I felt something brushing against my leg. I looked down, and she shot away from my leg like a streak, as almost as if she were playing with him because he was in the water watching all of this. And he said, I snapped a few pictures and kept shooting until he hit the surface. And she's known as the Kauai Point mermaid, and he claims he got 2 photographs of her. I thought it was really interesting. And then after this all comes, he gets back to shore, he finds out that there were a boat of 10 tourists who saw the mermaid too. They saw her swimming among the dolphins. They saw her leap into the air, describing her very close to what he had seen. And he was really rattled by that. So we're going to go to 2000. There's a witness by the name of Marco Batu, who was also from Zimbabwe in a place called Charmwood. He saw a naked white woman with scaled fishtail basking in the sun on a rock, half immersed in a pool of water. When he tried to get closer, the woman dove into the water, and a few days later, he saw her again on the same spot. This time, she apparently had, and this is what he described, it looked like clothing, like laundry, laying on the rocks above her as if to dry in the sun. And when she saw him, she grabbed the clothing that was drying and took off under the water with them. A week later, he saw her for a 3rd time holding a baby, is what he just said. It looked like a baby. And once again, she disappeared with her child when he approached. This would be the last time he would see her. But he had 3 separate reports in that area. In 2005, in the Caspian Sea. There were the reports of residents that a fish man was swimming around and in and out of the shoals, and fish were drawn to him, and whenever he went into the waters, it turned clear, even though the water was murky otherwise. A captain from a trawler called the Baku reported that he saw this male creature swimming parallel with the boat for a long time. It had a human face and had hair on its head, and its fins looked very unusual. Other residents also saw the beast and reported it. Multiple people saw more than one entity swimming through the water as though they were all swimming together like a school of fish. He described it as about 165 centimeters. It had a protruding stomach. Its feet were webbed, as its fingers were webbed. Skin was very pale white. Hair was black and greenish. He said that it had arms and legs and were heavier than a human being's. Fingernails were growing very long, and he had an aquiline nose that reminded him of a dolphin's beak.
Hmm.
Eyes were large, much larger than human eyes, and the mouth was fairly large, with a jaw protruding and the lips flowing over the mouth and down over the chin. He doesn't sound like somebody I want to meet. He also described that this being it reminds me very much of, do you ever see a betta fish with those beautiful long fins?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Okay. He described it as having those kinds of long fins coming off its arms and down across its body.
Hmm.
And he said that people had seen it numerous times, and every time it realized it was spotted, it would dive back under the water. So we're going to go to Peru, September 2007. There were 20 students in Peru at the lake Fuentacocha, where they saw a fish-tailed woman in the water, bathing herself, splashing water over her hair. When she realized she was watched, she signaled with her hands for them to come into the water with her. The children said, students or teen, like preteen, that the young woman was very pretty with golden hair, wavy, and very pale skin. She had no legs, but had a fish tail instead. The strange creature realized the children were frightened, and she dove under the water and did not reappear. Now, they weren't there by themselves. They were with the class. So there were adults there who also saw it. And this is the Western Cape of South Africa, 2008. A mermaid was seen in an area called Kiliman by a group of friends camping on the river. They said that they heard noises coming from the water, and they went to investigate, and they came face to face with a creature. They reported it like this. They said that it was about 11:30 p.m. when they heard the splashing, and it sounded like something had hit a wall. You know that boom, when something hits water really hard. And so they turned on lights and looked, and they said it was a white woman with long black hair thrashing about in the water. They tried to help the woman, but she made these strange sounds, and they were soft and low and mournful. He said, "My heart could take no more. They were so sorrowful." The creature was half human, half fish, and it seemed to be in the deep pools. And then she broke free of whatever was holding on to her and dove into the water. And they reported this to the police, and in the police report it states there was no misuse of alcohol, and all vouched for the veracity of the group. I thought that was interesting. We've got a couple more accounts, and we're just about to the end here. So there was an account in 2009 from Israel. Dozens of people were claiming that at sunset, a young woman with a fishtail would appear and do tricks in the water. There were multiple local sightings of her leaping up in the water and what have you. Friends, groups of friends would go there and decide to like kind of watch out for the lady because it became like a local story. She was seen multiple times in a couple weeks. And this is the story of this one particular group of friends. They said she was laying on the sand in a weird way when we first got there. At first, we thought it was a sunbather, but when we approached, she slid into the water and disappeared. We were in shock because she had a tail. She was just at the edge of the water. Many people were telling us that it was a mermaid, and we did not want to believe this, but it was a half girl, half fish jumping like a dolphin. She came up out of the water and began to leap into the air as though to entertain us. And then she dove under the water and disappeared. The Center for Coastal Oceanic Research in Los Angeles became interested in this. There was an offer from the Israeli government of $1 million reward for anybody who could catch her live. And apparently nobody's ever claimed it. Now I'm going to do two more stories, and they're going to be the most difficult to believe in some respects, but they're also fascinating. So Joe Rogan had a gentleman on his show a little while ago, and this guy's name is Ruin Coleman. He's a commercial fisherman from New Bedford, and he was talking to this guy because this guy got on TikTok, this fisherman, and said that he had seen something that was pretty extraordinary. So basically, he was in there's this hotel and a bar and restaurant and this little lagoon in the area where he lived. And he was there with some friends, and there was this kid, little French kid, who was there swimming. So his parents didn't want him in the water by himself. And so this guy, Rune, said, "Hey, I'm going to go down and swim. He's welcome to come with me." And apparently the parents were much more forgiving than most today because they said, "Oh, okay, that's fine." But maybe it's a cultural thing. I don't know. So they went down to the water, and according to him, he saw what they both saw, a merman that he described as resembling a fish person jumping out of the water, and that they were in the water when they first encountered it, and that it came at him so rapidly, like he grabs the little boy and kind of pushes him behind him, and this thing shoots past them and is gone. And he describes it as very angry and very upset, as though they had been interlopers in its realm. He gets the kid out of the water. They go back. The kid's really upset and scared. He tries to explain what was going on, and the kid keeps screaming about the fish man, the fish man. And he describes him as very aggressive. So I thought that was interesting that it actually caught Joe Rogan's attention. And now this last story is the reason that I started down this rabbit hole in the first place. Recently, in the last 2 months, there have been various short, by short I mean under 15 minutes, most likely, podcasts that have been put out by multiple people, all linchpinning back to one particular podcast. And the podcast is about is a woman, and she looks like she's in her 50s. I don't and she's telling this story about, it's a friend of a friend kind of a story. I knew this person whose son was named Lance, and he got into some trouble with the law as a young adult, and dad kind of bailed him out, but the deal was he had to get a job and get on his own and like grow up, right? So he went and talked to a family member who worked on a fishing trawler, and took a job there. And the way the captain worked it, I think this is pretty much how it works standard for these fishing boats, is that when you're done with your haul, everybody shares a percentage based upon, how many years you've been working and all of that. So this kid's going to get a percentage, right, of whatever they catch during his working with them. And his family member tells him, like, it's great whenever you go into port and they sell the fish, but we have the special cargo we go after sometimes. Now that's where you really make your money. And he's like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Just don't want to talk about it. We're not supposed to mention it much, but like you'll see when the time comes, you'll see. So basically, it's the middle of the night one night, and the captain wakes everybody up, all hands on deck, kind of a deal. And they go pouring out. This kid's kind of rattled because, like, he's new to this whole thing. And they're talking about they caught something and it's got to be put in the tank. And there's this big, just huge tank that's in the one section of the ship. And they get to shore, and the next morning, because they have to offload this special cargo, and he's like, this has to be the thing my family member was talking about, the special thing. So they drape this thing and take it off the ship, and it goes to a local restaurant, and it's a very high-end restaurant for very, very well-to-do people. Like, you're paying $500 a plate or more, kind of a place. And so this kid is just, he's going along on this delivery, and the long and the short of it is he comes to realize that what's in the tank, when they push it into the back of the restaurant, he sees that it's not a human, but kind of human. He thinks it's a mermaid, and that they've caught it, and he wants to know why it's here. And the family member kind of hems and haws a little, and he's like, nah, it don't matter, just keep going. And he's like, no, seriously, why is it here? Why are you taking it here? And he's like, dude, there's people that pay lots of really good money to eat these damn things, and to eat them alive. Like they paralyze them somehow, and then they
Ah,
eat them. Now this is interesting, because remember when I said it the last week, and I was talking about the Japanese, and I said that there's going to be stories of these things having the ability to like make people not age, things like that.
oh yeah,
There are,
the water with the bones. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, there are in several cultures, there are these stories that these things will stop aging, will reverse diseases, will, elongate your life. And he says that that's what was going on there, that they had very special clientele who would come in for those reasons and pay buku bucks. That's the story
Hmm.
that started it. Okay. And I'm like, that's really interesting. And it reminded me of some other stories I have heard of other substances that have been used in that same way, some of which people have said weren't real. And then later on, I found out they were real. Like there is really adrenaline that goes into your blood that changes your blood when you're really, really frightened, and, and stuff like that. So it was an interesting story. Now, is it true? I have no way of telling you it is or it isn't. I have no clue. But that's kind of what got me started down that rabbit hole in the beginning. Was I wonder how many mermaid stories there are, and if anybody's ever claimed to have caught one. But apparently there are, according to the story anyway, that this has happened. And any way you look at it, there's a lot of mermaid stories for something that's not supposed to be real. And they're
Sure.
not just
Mhm.
stories from 200 years ago, like we're talking the 2000s. So they're still out, I mean, or at least the stories are still out there, and people describe them fairly consistently. And with that, I am done.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and I guess I'll say good night.
Good night.
As I mentioned before, this is the first Sunday in April. And for those in the Christian world, next Sunday is Palm Sunday, and the Sunday after that is Easter Sunday. So we will not be recording on those days. So look forward to us recording our next episode on or about the 27th of April. So we're going to take 2 weeks. And that episode should get released the first Friday in May, May 2nd. So hopefully that's how things were going to work out. Now, we were both notified when we launched this session using Skype that Skype would no longer be available after the month of April. So we're going to be using Teams, and even though I'm a computer geek and I'm supposed to be using Teams all the time, we will hopefully have to work out a routine where we can record our sessions, and hopefully we'll have that all worked out. And by the time you see this message, we'll have it worked out.
Yes.
So thank you for bearing with us. Yeah, thank you for bearing with us. during this season, and we will see you in May.
Yes, we will.